I'm Jordan Jewell, former analyst at IDC for 7 years. I led the commerce practice there. Now I've come over to VTEX as the analyst in residence, and I'm really excited to present with Mariano, our founder at VTEX, and Robert at Hearst, the Chief Technology Officer of e-commerce. Really quick introductions, but you might be asking yourself, why is Hearst up here? Hearst, over a 100-year-old company, really well known for media and their publications, such as Men's Health, Cosmopolitan, Harper's Bazaar, many, many, many more. And I'm extremely excited about them as a customer of VTEX. They have one of the most interesting transformations in e-commerce stories that we're going to tell here on the stage. So, and sorry, give me one sec. So I wanted to set the stage by kind of going through some data. I'm an analyst. I want to go through some data about a reminder about what we've been seeing in the market. So we've all heard the story about the boom that we saw in retail and e-commerce during the pandemic. And here I've gone to the Census Bureau, pulled their data specifically about what revenue looked like over the course of the past 15 or so years, or 10 years in this case. And looking at this data, last year Mariano and I came here on stage and we showed that we have now entered the era of profitability. So historically, pre-pandemic, we were in the era of what we call the old normal. Retail was fairly predictable. Both growth and profit was very balanced. E-commerce was kind of viewed as a side project, didn't contribute a huge meaningful amount of revenue or growth. And then, as we all know, we experienced this in 2020 through 2022 especially, was an era of growth at all costs. So if you look across most retailers or brands, this was an era defined as hyper-focus on growth. Everyone was focused on how much retailers and brands were growing. E-commerce was the savior. People weren't going in stores originally, so e-commerce was viewed as the savior. And again, there was a balance prior, but that balance shifted completely towards growth, sometimes at the expense of profit. One of our customers, Carrefour, for example, came on stage last year and told us that during this period of time, they weren't as focused on margins. They were just handling a huge influx of online orders they were experienced during this time. And finally, this really started last year in the early spring, of 2022, I should say. We entered the era of profitability. And this is a move back away from growth to an extent, not as focused on growth because financial markets have been more difficult, and needing to really hone in margins, unit economics, focusing on that era, that profitability number. How do I make sure my e-commerce business isn't just the growth driver for my company, but how do I make sure it's actually in the black? So that's the first main point we want to get across. We talked about this last year, but we're still in the era of profitability. I believe many of you retailers and brands know this. You've gotten a lot of pressure to be profitable, more so than in the years prior. And we've been seeing that. So Robert, first question for you. I wanted to ask you, obviously you're not a retailer yourself, but what have you seen with your business, your brand partners, your customers that kind of align with this story of profitability?
I mean, I've seen it from both sides, Jordan. And I think that part of the story is really also one of kind of the emergence of social and user growth here in the US. And that was something that in prior lives, we were really successful at finding our customer base and reaching our audience. You had a lot of tools that didn't exist before. But as growth plateaued and competition increased, pricing there went up. And when we talk about it internally to Hearst, it's really a story of where is your audience spending time looking and researching their decision before they commit. And that is one area where our content and a media company really plays nicely into that for a lot of kind of high consideration purchases where someone may not be an expert in the space or have access to the expertise. They're starting from search, but they're finding our content helps answer and helps them navigate the questions they have about that space. And so for me, it's kind of a story from a brand perspective of finding where folks are spending time, looking before they're making a purchase decision, kind of that mid-funnel, and trying to be present in all of those wherever you can. And technology has evolved in this period where it's much easier to integrate and be present in multiple marketplaces. You don't have to build all those integrations bespoke. And so it's now lower cost and easier than ever before to really be present wherever your customers are shopping and finding that inspiration. So that's really a big focus for us. And I could say that from prior lives in a brand, kind of one of those key strategies to diversifying and maintaining that kind of efficient acquisition cost is not betting at all on one or two kind of key channels.
Definitely. I mean, we're actually gonna touch on that acquisition cost because that's a huge conversation among brands and retailers. So I also pulled additional data to help tell this story. There's been tons of conversation about e-commerce going back to the mean. That was very common last year when the actual growth of offline retail grew faster than online for a little while, which was unheard of. But I literally pulled this 2 days ago, this data from the Census Bureau. What you'll see here is e-commerce, again, is that growth driver. It's become essential for retailers if they want to grow to do so with e-commerce, whether that's a blended strategy, online, offline, omni-channel. Direct-to-consumer need to consider all the channel options and marketplaces and such. But the point being here, if you look at these numbers, and if you account for inflation, growth is actually negative in offline retail. The actual number of units a retailer on average in the US is selling has actually gone down, and e-commerce is really keeping companies afloat. But again, you have to make sure you're doing so profitably. It's not sufficient to just sell more if it comes at a bigger cost, of course. So again, this is to set the stage for how we at VTEX and our customers are really thinking about the trends in the market. And now I'm gonna go, again, I like graphs, I'm gonna go dive into some brutal facts that are very relevant in retail right now under this guise of era profitability. So first off, customer acquisition costs are higher than ever. Now, this graph is actually kind of combining a couple things, but one of our partners, Simplicity DX, did an analysis of how much it costs to just attain a new customer and how much benefit you got from that, and how much basically how much you could monetize an existing customer. And what they found is over the past 10 years, it's actually become more profitable to have an existing customer because of the lifetime value of that customer and the average cart value, that sort of thing. But it's also become more expensive to acquire new customers. And that's because of advertising costs have increased quite a lot. The iOS changes, for instance, really were difficult for a lot of retailers and brands. The conversation is that's about to happen with Google as well on Chrome, getting rid of cookies. So this is very relevant to brands who do a lot of digital advertising. Customer acquisition costs, according to Simplicity DX, have gone up threefold over that 10-year period. The second brutal fact that we're seeing a lot is D2C is very difficult. And I'm going to show a second graph on this slide, but this is a quote from BCG about just kind of summarizing that difficulty of D2C. It's from a report they wrote. I highly recommend it. If you look up BCG D2C, you'll find it. But it summarizes how D2C companies' margins are getting really thin, if not negative. And in fact, if you look across some of the most known D2C companies out there, they're all great companies. I own their products. They're very well-known, popular D2C companies, but the truth is none of them are profitable. These are all numbers pulled from their most recent financial statements, and they're all in the red. They're not bringing in profit, and part of the reason is because they don't have a dispersed business model where they're selling offline plus online across other retailers, across other marketplaces, and that gets really, really costly, again, to acquire new customers over time. The third brutal fact we wanted to highlight is Chinese companies are actually outperforming American companies in the US in recent years. So I'm not trying to scare you, but this is, I thought, really...
You are.
I'm trying to spin the positive of it too, but you know, Temu had this Super Bowl commercial in February last year that spiked up the traffic they received. And I think no one would be surprised to see their traffic was higher in February than Target's. But that persisted throughout the entire year. Their traffic, this is focusing on July because there's very good data for it, but their traffic actually exceeded Target's almost twofold throughout the year. And there's multiple reasons for that. You could say there's hesitations, like, is this the next Wish.com? But the point I'm trying to get across, again, I don't only mean to scare you, but these Chinese companies are doing very innovative things. That's the reason why they're appealing to a lot of consumers. They're doing things with live shopping or video commerce or concierge commerce, as we call it at IDC. And that they're effective. They're making quite an impact on the market because they're getting more traffic than Target, one of the biggest retailers in the world. Again, and that's only in the US. Temu and Shein, the two top Chinese companies, they operate in America. They chose to go into America, not China. So the fourth brutal fact, again, not trying to scare you, but this just shows the consolidation of the online, the e-commerce market. I don't think too many of you will be surprised to see just how dominant the top 7 retailers are in terms of e-commerce, but you can see that 56% of the market is controlled by these retailers, especially obviously Amazon. And the only problem with that is it's difficult for brands, for you in many cases, to sell online when you're going up against this high dominance by such retailers. So this is a brutal fact. This is a problem with the market that we expect to see go down over time. We expect to see niche marketplaces really pop up more and more, ones where they're really curated for specific kinds of consumers to combat this, to add more differentiation to the market. And then the final brutal fact, and this is a little harder chart to digest, so I'll explain it, is consumers are facing choice overload. If you go on one of the many mass marketplaces out there, there is a long tail of SKUs in the hundreds of thousands or millions. It becomes extremely difficult to decide which products to choose from. A human brain cannot analyze 100 products against each other. And so this chart, it's actually a chart representing a psychology study that was done decades ago. But what that study found is that consumers think they like a lot of choice. So the blue columns in both cases, in a grocery store, they put products out and they tracked how many people came to the table with a product, how much interest was shown in orange, and then finally how much was converted in gray. And what they found is consumers, when there was 26 items on the table, they showed a lot of interest. 60% showed interest. Whereas when there was fewer items, there was only 6 on the stand, 40% showed interest. But there was much higher conversion when there's fewer options. Much higher, you can see it there. It's almost 5-fold. So, or higher than 5 actually. So what this means is, again, on that theme of niche marketplaces, there's an opportunity to provide more curated assortments, merchandising to customers, because customers think they want a lot of options. They think they want 1,000 SKUs potentially, but it actually leads to poorer conversion. So with those 5 brutal facts in mind, Robert, what are some of your thoughts and what are you seeing related to them?
You know, I would think of them, I kind of grouped these into a couple of bigger buckets. You know, the first one I alluded to a minute ago, but it's really finding your audience as it shifts around online. And that gets harder to do when you're switching platforms, when algorithms are changing out from under you. And when you're managing a team that's trying to stay on top of that and keep growth alive and do it efficiently, that's a real headwind. That sophomore album is often harder than the first hit in some cases. And that's only going to continue to kind of evolve. And so that's something you almost need to design into your organization and think about when you're looking at your channel strategy and trying to play in multiple different parts of that consumer's journey from the first time they see your brand or they see your product to the final purchase. And being mindful of the types of queries that people are going to be searching for or the types of sites they're going to be on throughout that process is something you really have to think of strategically. It cannot be ad hoc. To the competition part, this is one that really intrigued me when you shared it before. I group that into the burden, like the decision that you have to make as a consumer getting harder for a couple of different reasons. You alluded to the just explosion of kind of global sellers and brands, many of which were just not in given markets before. And so you have quality product that suddenly you've never heard of, even if you're familiar with some of the brands. And that creates doubt in your mind. Now you're wondering, well, why haven't I heard of them? Maybe I should look at this brand because it might be at a better price point. And that's really the challenge I think a lot of consumers face in the market today is which ones do I pick to this slide? Some of them are worthy of your trust, some of them are not. Most of us have purchased something online where it might have been a brand we trusted, but it came from a seller that maybe wasn't as reputable, and you had to work through that process. And you do that once or twice, and there's that little bit of kind of fear in the back of your mind where you're now having to spend time in your purchase process deciding who to trust. Is this review written by somebody who actually bought it and used it? Was it pay to play? Is this brand or the seller somebody who I should trust to fulfill the product? And as those lines blur, it means you end up doing more research, certainly when you're not an expert in the field. And that's something that internal to Hearst, we talk a lot about, again, to the value of content. We have time and our journalists can go and do that hard research. We have the expertise and we have networks of our audience that help us in testing certain products and categories. And so it's one of the things that we're really keen on as we think about commerce's evolution is how do you bring some of that expertise into the commerce experience? That being kind of a key way to continue the evolution of that process and really try to make this a little bit simpler, right? Sometimes we want to geek out and go really deep and do a lot of research. Sometimes we're just too busy and we just want to find a good product that is going to fit our needs, and we want to do that in less time. And so that's kind of the challenge I think consumers face. And I would argue a lot of brands do too. I certainly faced it in a lot of the brands that I helped operate, of how do we do this and kind of fine tune it so that you're meeting folks at different points in their journey and you're doing it in a way that you can afford.
Yeah. So in recap, the first main point I wanted to get across was just, again, we're in the era of profitability. The second is this idea of niche marketplaces, that there's really a place for them that's kind of opening up in the market, that this is a need consumers have. And I alluded to it in the very beginning. Robert's talked about it a little bit, about their initiative, what they're going forward doing with e-commerce. Again, extremely excited about that, but I'm gonna hand it over to Mariano and Robert to kind of have a more one-on-one discussion about that topic, what Hearst is doing right now in e-commerce.
So when you heard about Hearst, what means Hearst, right? Many of you, I didn't know Hearst. But if I tell you that Hearst has almost the same level of traffic that Amazon has in the United States. Hearst Corporation has multiple brands with millions, hundreds of millions of visitors. Bazaar, Cosmopolitan, Men's Health, Women's Health, so on.
You can name them for a while.
And if we are in a moment of time that cost of acquisition is in the peak, and concierge commerce is popping up where you are fed up of choosing because it's too much. For example, myself, I was about to buy a ski. I want an off-piste ski, and I went to Amazon or backcountry, and I did have like 300 of them. I just don't have time to go over the blogs and everything and say, forget about it. I call a friend that's much more advanced than myself and say, oh, this is the best. So go there and buy it. I bought a Garmin watch because I do spear fishing, and I enter in Garmin, that's a very specialized, clusterized kind of store, and I say, I just want a watch. and they gave me probably 12 choices. I don't have time to choose on the 12 ones. And then I call a friend that gave me an idea, say, why not to choose this one that's the best? So I believe we are entering in an era that I'm calling a concierge commerce, where people will help you to choose, will help you to have it, will help you on the post service as well. And why not to have the biggest corporation in the United States controlling traffic enter in e-commerce? You have a curated, editorial, backgrounded group with the traffic inside, and now transform themselves into e-commerce. And that's my first question for you. Why? Why did Hearst decided last year to enter in e-commerce?
No, I mean, I would maybe characterize that slightly differently as kind of the evolution of our commerce strategy. So we've written and covered what to buy and why you should consider buying it for years. We have deep expertise inside the company, everything from automotive to home goods. Like think of Car and Driver testing cars, and Good Housekeeping testing. Literally, I read an article over Christmas around 80 towels that they kind of ran down, and they narrowed it down to 10. And that has been something our audience has used to figure out what to purchase. And many of you have run into this. You've read an article that has a link to a retailer. But there are gaps in some of that experience. You think about things where size or the colorway variations matter. That research is happening off-site. You have to go and leave kind of the editorial experience it's giving you the alternatives to go figure out, does this one fit my foot, right? Or can I get it in time for the race? So we think of this as an extension. It's a way to take that existing experience and make it deeper. So if you want to figure out only the shoes that deal with, my foot size or my particular running needs, bringing the capability in a marketplace to do some of that research in the context of the recommendation is where we think it really becomes quite powerful. So for us, this is building on past success of businesses that have been live for many years. Here in the US, we have a property called Shop Bazaar that focuses on higher end fashion that has been very successful in this space. We have a business over in Japan around L Shops that's been around for I think more than a decade now. That has a very large audience and very successful in what they do. So when we thought about this, we said, look, one of the challenges is how do we go faster there? How can we look at high consideration purchases? What do we need to do as a company to make it structurally easier to come into new verticals, to new subjects that we don't have commerce experiences on today, and do that in a more scalable way? And that was really kind of the impetus for starting this next chapter.
And let's remember that's a trend, right? We did have a Google coming for commerce with the shopping. We do have TikTok launching e-commerce all over. We do have companies from e-commerce going to content like Amazon that launched their studios. Now that with Amazon.com/live, a new live shopping coming to the US. So. I believe that content and commerce will be one only category in 10 years' time. So it's not going to be like, oh, I am a content company or I am a commerce company. It's going to be one declaration. You curate, you deliver, and you are responsible for the customer experience. That's my bet. Okay, Hearst, like a big auditorial kind of force, well-renowned brands. How do you believe you're gonna make the difference in these kind of a very, very crowded marketplace market? Where do you feel Hearst can do the difference for the customers themselves?
I mean, starting from like our audience's perspective and the customer experience, for us, the number one rule internally is editorial independence. So we want to make sure that the content that you're already reading and consuming, that's not biased by the way we think of commerce and its integration between the two. But the value there is in the curation. It's not looking at 80 towels, it's looking at 10. And having someone who can kind of contextualize the difference between each of those 10. Maybe this one is better for someone who is active and needs to take it to the gym, and this one's better at home. That's really where we want to start. So the goal is not carry everything. The goal is be very curated and gated in how we think about selection and make sure that it's always adjacent to the subject we're already covering. So we want to have things that are relevant. It may not be every single item in the contents available in the marketplace and vice versa. We may have extensions, full lines from brands that never got picked up, but might be relevant if that particular piece of clothing maybe doesn't fit your body type, or you like the kind of shape of it, but you don't like the pattern. So we can then go and use the commerce experience as a way to let you explore that and make that decision yourself without having to jump onto a bunch of different tabs and do independent research or repeatedly go back to search and try again to go narrow down that funnel. We think that's friction. We think everybody who's been in commerce long enough knows the more friction, the less conversion you see. And so for us, it's a story of how we can shorten that path, whether you enter our experience through kind of a typical commerce experience, like a store, or you enter from content, which is where we expect most of the audience to live, but always curating. We don't want that expertise to really ever go anywhere, but we see it as an opportunity to also share that expertise in different ways. You could think of multiple editors maybe talking about a given product or a company from different perspectives. It could be a shoe line that's relevant in fitness and also in fashion contexts. There's not a natural place in an article to show that, but it would be a great thing to have on a detail page, where you can suddenly see a product that you're interested in and think about using it in different ways. And that's the journey we're really excited about creating. But it is high consideration and curated. Those are the things that we focus on the most.
Perfect. Then we go for the next question. It's you came from not in the editorial industry. April here came from the CDO of Hearst, came without any background on editorial. So you came from technology, e-commerce background, and joined a corporation where we do have the representation of the CEO here as well. And it's pretty amazing how the world is changing, right? When we could imagine that a powerful CEO of one of the most recognized corporations in US are in the floor, listen to the others and say what and how to innovate. That's how I feel right now. I believe with the Google and Meta kind of cost of acquisition in the peak, something will happen. So more and more initiatives like Hearst will pop up. In this case specifically, when did you set up the project? I know that shop.men's health is already live, right? So anyone wants to check e-commerce from Hearst, shop.men's health, it's already live. It's the first brand that went live, many others to come. So what is the go-to market? How did you pop up the project? How do you run the project? It's not easy to, from the grounds, to bring a marketplace up and launch in less than, I don't know, 10 months? Tell me a little bit more the project.
It's actually just a shade over 6. I think
6?
Yeah, a shade over 6 months from when we started this, hired the team and went live. The way we've approached that is kind of twofold. One, focus on a single subject area at a time, so we can focus our selection, acquisition, and discussions with sellers. But really trying to take the lens of get vendors and partners in place like VTEX that provide a really solid and consistent experience out of the box, one that's familiar. We really want to minimize how much we are teaching customers to shop different ways, teaching brands and selling partners to integrate with a new platform that has all sorts of different requirements and rules. A key through line for us was look for things that are familiar and ways that you can get started quickly, and then learn. See how the audience is engaging, see what is a barrier to conversion and what's helping, and then make strategic investments to kind of optimize in the places where you think you can go further. So that was a big one for us, rather than approaching a project where everyone who's been in commerce for a while has probably started a project where you have acres of documentation around the way you think it should work that may or may not align with what you're used to as a customer. And I've long been a fan of trying to minimize re-educating people on the things they already know how to do, unless you've got a really specific reason it has to be different. And that was something we looked at every step of the project and really took kind of a hard, red line through the things that weren't absolutely critical path to get moving. We do intend to continue investing and looking at where we can meet people in different ways and expose different kinds of content to them. That's kind of the evergreen nature of the project, but it let us get off the ground quickly.
Yeah, something that was very interesting for us is that the mentality of Hearst on be lean, fast, test, delivery, from the ground, from zero to go live in 6 to 7 months, a marketplace with the size and traffic that Hearst has in the United States It's not a simple thing. And when they came on board, they have the choice, and that's another question for you. You have the choice to ask for budget for millions of dollars and create your own technology and become a very powerful CTO with hundreds of people below you, but then you choose to have 20, 30, 40 people and to trusting providers and move fast. This is an IT as a business driver. What came into your mind to just go for that route? Like why you didn't customize your own technology?
I mean, part of it is what I alluded to a minute ago of waiting for signal to really know where you want to invest. But I think the other side of it is really focusing our investment on where we're differentiating. The content we bring to bear and how we can make it exposed in the commerce experience and make it part of that journey and make it really fluid when you're in an article reading and doing research and you're inspired to go in and decide, is this the right product or brand for you? Those are things that are somewhat unique to our context because we have so much content. That's where we need to invest the most. Other things around just making a predictable checkout experience possible or making it easy for sellers to onboard selection and manage orders. Those are the things that we knew we wanted to be good, but we didn't have to be unique or special. And so that's the balancing act that we're constantly kind of teasing out. The goal being, as we see areas of opportunity, as we learn from our audience, we can then decide to customize or go deep in that area when the time is right. But you want to make that decision as late as you can with the most data you can so that you don't have a hypothesis that's not informed by real customer behavior that could be very expensive that you then later realize didn't have the same impact. It's very easy to kind of design what you think your perfect solution is, but ultimately it's the market that's going to tell you what's needed.
Yesterday you told me something that was interesting to hear. You said, like, I'm a big fan of VTEX.io. VTEX.io is a framework where you can develop and extend the solution of VTEX instead of just isolate and plug through APIs. You can do this as well, but you can also extend the code of VTEX. Why an extension of a code in a framework that's already there is better than a kind of a network of APIs?
I think it comes down to how much of the system you have to understand before you can comfortably replace parts of it. And APIs and opening up what were historically monolithic systems, that's not a new trend necessarily. It's been around for a while. But one of the things that we learned when we were in market, some of the platforms, they give you the basic operations. You can manipulate data, you can access it. But the minute you're trying to orchestrate a workflow, let's use the example of an item that for some reason doesn't ship. We want to be able to say this item's not going to ship, and we would expect the refund to be automated. And there's a lot of platforms out there that leave you up to your own devices to figure out how to do that automation. Now, you ask the question, it knew how to charge you the money. It could calculate all those things. So clearly it understands the financial ramifications of a unit that doesn't ship. But now you're replicating that often in your own customized kind of environment just to provide what we would assume as consumers is out-of-the-box functionality. So one of the things we liked about VTEX writ large, and I'll plug I/O in a minute, is the ability to orchestrate through the API, not just manipulate data. And that was a big standout feature for us. And we liked the I/O side of it because it allowed us to host some of those customizations inside the broader VTEX environment. Think of cost of ownership and the size of your tech team. The less you have to host and secure and oversee, the easier it is to keep your team small and efficient. And it wasn't something we were in market for because it's not available on a lot of different platforms. But as we went deeper on the places we knew we needed to customize, it became really clear we would have less of an ongoing operational burden. And we could leverage the knowledge and skill of your team that has a lot higher scale on the commerce front than we do today to make sure that those things were integrated and working quickly. So that was something that really stood out to us, and I won't say that was on me. Our engineers looked at it and kind of said, this is great, we like this better, and that's a heavy vote in favor.
Breaking protocol a little bit. Do you have the slide that I can show? Let's see if we can bring it up.
The next one, or?
The next one, yes.
Yeah. So just to make the transition, so we haven't said the word, but like the word that we've basically been talking around is composable commerce. That's been one of the biggest, if not the biggest buzzword, maybe other than Gen AI, in the industry right now, in the commerce software space. And we've been hearing it a lot. I know many retailers and brands are interested in it. So we wanted to talk a little bit about Hearst's view on composable commerce and kind of what we're seeing at VTEX.
Yeah, if you can see this picture here, you do have in the left side how the market was like 15 years ago. Legacy platforms, big deployments, kind of one unique instance of database, and then we migrate for in the last 10 years for a best of breed. It was a party, right? With the level of valuations of companies in the level that were, every single company wanted to be a tech. So we have a retail tech, fintech, health tech, whatever tech. And then they realized that after being tech for 5 years, they have the trouble or the challenge of maintaining the tech. Because remember that the developers, they love to build. They hate to maintain. So when you are in a company that you are building, you have plenty of developers wanting to work for you. But then you enter in the lean phase where you need to squeeze the infrastructure and just be efficient. Oh, then they start having problems. They want to go for a kind of a break, and then they move to other companies that's in building. So at the end of the day, maintenance is the secret of a high growth organization. And we do see the solution for that. It is the evolution of the best of breed, where you do have a composable of 30, 40 systems working together on API. Now you can have a backbone where you can choose what to unlock and extend, what to unlock and extend and connect to a third party, or what to unlock and extend and connect to your own kind of custom application. And by the way, Hearst, for example, if Robert and April choose a path of a checkout and they just didn't like it, don't like it anymore, then just write off that piece and come back to the out-of-the-box functionality. So this is the pragmatic composability that VTEX stands for. You need to have the freedom to say no to a mistake on your architecture. Because keeping a simple architecture is the secret of having a high growth business. And we are proud that together with Hearst, we land in a very simple architecture, 6 months go live, very complex kind of integrations. And the future will tell who company has more margin. That's the only matters, or the only subject that matters. Who will have the most margin will win the game. So this is our vision about composability. Give me the next slide just to have a glimpse of what is a composable. This is what we call composable commerce. You can change any box of this picture for any market solution. So for example, if you want to use Salesforce as a CRM, you can use it. If you want to use Miracle as a seller hub, you can use it. If you want to use a Algolia as your search, you can use it. And this is all out-of-the-box plugins from VTEX. So this is where I believe lands the era of profitability. At the end of the day, your tech stack should represent less than 4% of your GMV. If you are above 4%, you don't have the margin you need to survive. So, Robert, any comments on composable commerce, the composability, how you work with this puzzle, what to compose, what to use out of the box? Give me a little bit more on how you use this kind of a tool in your favor.
I mean, for us, it started with just understanding what was available. And to the appeal of having a complete solution, anyone who has replatformed once or twice or many more times than that, like I have, you see different approaches to these integrations. For a while, it was apps. That was a really common buzzword as smartphones are picking up. And the challenge you have when it isn't built together and I think really tested together is that you end up becoming the person who has to go test it. So you're finding the things that don't really line up. Oh, that order management plugin manipulated an order in a way that isn't compatible with the return system later. How do you find out? Something explodes, your customer service team calls you, you scramble the team to go try to fix it. And it's not the fault of anyone participating in that ecosystem because their part works fine, often in a simpler environment. But the value of the kind of complete solution out of the box is you don't have to start worried about those edge cases. You've got something that's been battle tested by a lot of folks on the platform. And then you can go through and look at how it actually works in your kind of tabletop exercise and decide what's not good enough. And so, that's an area like in our integration, we brought Miracle in to help with seller integration. And a big driving factor there was familiarity. Not everybody uses it, but it was the most common when we looked at the folks that we were looking to integrate with. And so that was an option we took. And I think that's the power of being able to focus those decisions when you need to specialize or when there is like a compelling market dynamic that's pushing you one way or the other without having to say, well, I have a core platform that maybe does a handful of things well, but I have to bring in a dozen other vendors to deliver the complete solution I want. You're now responsible for testing each of those integrations, not just with the core, but with each other. And that adds a lot of maintenance and can really drive negative customer experience if you're not careful, because that's how you get sites that behave erratically or things that are promised one way on a detailed page and change in checkout. And that was a thing we were really looking for from the beginning. How do we make sure we can focus where we're going to specialize and customize on the areas that matter the most to us?
Just to check if there are CEOs in the audience, have your CIO asking for budget and headcount? That's a very modern.
Don't give away all my budget and headcount yet, please. Some of my bosses are in the room, but
no, come on. This is a very modern CIO, very modern CTO that knows that the power is not in the number of people that you manage, but the outcome on the business that you provide. So it's pretty interesting how this modern approach on IT is taking over United States. I am in the United States as an operation for the last 7 years. I am myself based in the United States for the last 3.5 years. And I can say that last year we saw the CIOs starting to do the math and starting to realize that the party that was before is not sustainable. If they want to sustain their own position, they need to embrace other techniques. And the technique that's emerging and emerging strongly is the composable commerce. So thanks, Robert, for that.
And so this is actually your own architecture here up on the stage. I think we have a few questions, but one that comes to mind for me is, and we've actually had a retailer here in the US go through this exercise themselves, but how do you kind of make that cost benefit analysis about whether, I want to go out and get an external provider, use something that's already out of the box with something we already have, or build it ourselves? How do you do the math yourself? How do you crunch the numbers and try to figure out what's the best outcome for my business?
The way we try to start those questions is really understanding what is the possible upside. So you think about the value of user reviews. You can do that research and see how they help conversion. And so it starts from almost a TAM analysis of, is this feature differentiated enough that if we did it really well, it would be worth the effort? And then you look at costs and, to the comment on the share of revenue you're spending on the platform, you have to be mindful there. And sometimes the answer is it's not. Even if you did it perfectly well and you hit the best-in-class performance, you're not going to really net out. And so you want to do those evaluations early and just use that as your North Star for the program, because it tells you also how far to chase it. There's often a lot of discretion in how many features you use, or do you roll out the entire platform or just a component of it? And looking at the value opportunity every step in those kind of early discussions is really important. I think the other side of it is the operational lens. I spent a lot of my career in the back end of e-commerce, scaling and building these businesses, and thinking about what it's going to cost you every day after you've bought all the software, after you've finished the implementation, and the impact it's going to have on your team. And one of the questions we like to ask internally is, will our customers feel that? So if it's something that a customer is going to experience as a pain point, that matters to us a lot more than potentially a manual process that we're going to run once a month that's purely visible internally to the company or between us and a partner. And so we try to prioritize in that framework as well as the risk to the customer experience. Because the goal here is not to be the cheapest or not to be the fastest in these marketplaces, but it's to be transparent and fair. And so when we're looking at that, we're saying, all right, what's the best way to make sure, we have Avalara here. They are one of the best at calculating tax, and they have tremendous back office capability that helped us in filing. And so we said, look, together we have something we can believe is going to be accurate from a tax perspective, and it does make our internal process more efficient. So that was an area we chose to invest. But there's others where it's not as clear, or it's invisible, or it happens at such a slow rate that it's really not something you want to invest in early. You can do that when it's a bigger problem and it's happening more frequently, or you're hearing from your audience that this is a problem. It's a reason that I don't trust the experience anymore, and then you can go in and address it. So that's how we try to balance this, but less is more in terms of the number of counterparties, as I mentioned before. The fewer links you have to test, the fewer things you have to keep in your mind, the less coordination you have to do just to stay in lockstep with all the different vendor roadmaps, the better off your team's going to be, because they can then focus on listening to that customer signal and figuring out what's going to drive more conversion, what's going to drive a bigger audience. Those are the things that really ultimately matter when you're thinking of an online marketplace.
And you kind of answered this, but I know we had a conversation, I think just a week ago or so, but I mean, you're a leader in the e-commerce and technology space, but what would be your recommendation? And I'm thinking specifically on the talent side, hiring the right people, having to decide based on the technology I choose, I have to hire the right kind of talent as well. What are some of your thoughts about that recommendation, the aligning the technology with talent, and what would you recommend to other CTOs, CIOs in the space?
I can relay a personal story from years ago. One of my mentors when I was down in Silicon Valley and I were having this debate. They had chosen a pretty cutting edge tool set that really a lot of people were not familiar with. And so I was kind of challenging that decision and asking why. And the insight that I learned then and I try to apply now is look at things that are familiar. You want folks that are really curious and can work across a wide range of problem spaces in commerce. And we've all run into platforms where you have to hire a specialist that knows that one tool because the language is proprietary or the way it works is somewhat unusual or arcane and it's not understood unless you've done a lot of that work. And so when I approach technology choices, I look for tools that the average really high-skilled software engineer can pick up, can understand, and can be productive quickly. And that's not always a low-code, no-code kind of visual coding kind of problem, which was a big buzzword a few years ago. I think that addresses a different problem of how do you make technology configuration accessible to non-kind of technologists. But for us, is this familiar to our engineers? And we like to test that just by doing benchtop exercises. We'll take a real problem, we'll go look at documentation, if we can get a demo environment, and we'll go try to do it. We know we aren't going to understand all the nuances, but it's always a really easy proof point. It's always worth the day or two of investment, and you learn a tremendous amount about the lived experience of working in a platform from those sorts of experiments. So that's how we look at it.
And from VTEX point of view, we like to really thank you and the team because it's not common to have a very, very experienced team on IT, really deep on e-commerce, with integrity to listen for new solutions coming from abroad. VTEX runs operation in 38 countries. So naturally, we know an edge case of logistics in Romania or in India, and Hearst was pretty kind of a listen carefully. I'll say, oh, logistics, okay, United States is not the edge case, so what's the edge case? Maybe Mexico, maybe Argentina. So let's learn from them. Let's configure the system as should be for the years to come, not for the problem that I have today. So first of all, thank you and congrats for the team, and the partnership is kind of in the beginning of the process. Just put one live, many to come. But
Yes,
VTEX is really proud to have you as a client and really proud of the relationship.
Yeah, we're happy to be part of it.
And so I want to take the opportunity, what we've talked about, our concept of VTEX is called pragmatic composability, this approach to composable commerce where you focus on getting up and running quickly, and then choosing those components, those third-party applications that you can bring in that provide measurable business benefits. We're actually launching this today. This is a paper I wrote. You can scan the QR code. There's no paywall. You can get access right away. It's worth reading. And we'll also be following it up actually with another paper coming out in a couple months that dives into that math problem. We've actually built a business financial model that dives really deep into what are the dollars, the individual dollars that are affected by some of these architectural decisions. So again, love for you to scan it and access the paper.
And Jordan will post in LinkedIn. So Jordan VTEX, find him. And if you like the paper, he spent many hours on that. Leave him a message, collaborate. So that's I believe this message should spread the market. That to go fast, and that's my closing statements, if you allow me. To go fast, you need to address the complexity that the customers demands from you. But the first solution for addressing complexity is to become complex. So if you want to address complexity, and if you give a blank check for developers, they will address with complexity, with many apps to maintain, with many solutions integrated. It is really difficult to address complexity with a simple solution. That demands many hours of studs, of high brains on that. And then once you find a simple solution that fits a complex scenario, that's the masterpiece of efficiency. So we are all in on that. We believe in this world where you should be efficient. We believe in profit. That's weird, right? But we believe in profit. We believe that retail is not suffering yet the crisis that will come for the next 1-2 years. I believe the marketplaces will suffer as well because the cost of acquisition is just in the level that any company on earth can pay anymore. So you need to find other solutions to get the traffic, to get more conversion, and to be leaner. So at the end of the day, you need to have solution to spend at top 4% of your GMV in technology. So that's our statement. Thank you so much.
And
Robert,
I was just going to say, Robert, any closing statements? I know you're early days with your project still, but any final statements from you?
I mean, I think that's where I would probably end it, is the wait until you know what your audience needs before you make a lot of decisions. And if you can defer those big choices as long as possible, not only will you have more confidence when it's time to make them, but you can target your investment in the right areas. And that's a key thing for us that was a big part of our journey with VTEX and that we got from this composable approach, is that we could choose when, and we can continue that. So thank you for having us. We really appreciated being part of the journey, and congratulations to your team as well on what's been a pretty successful launch. So
thank you. We do have time for 2 questions. So I would ask the help of Jordan, if you can help me. Go. You have a mic.
Yeah.
Or who wants to do a question, or just stand up and do it louder? Come on, guys. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Questions?
they're going to be nice to us, I think.
Come on. The first one is tough. Then Drew, we have plenty of them. I can do one if we don't have from the audience. I can do one. So if you come back in time, you would you choose VTEX again? Would you choose the stack that you decide to have? What was the mistakes you went through by choosing VTEX? What was the hard kind of pieces that you find out that you didn't know about VTEX? The good things we know about VTEX. But what are the surprises that you were not anticipating by hiring VTEX?
Oh, you're going to put it out there. Okay. I think that in choosing a partner that is also investing really heavily, that was a part of our thesis when we were out in the market looking at solutions. And we wanted someone who was going to push our thinking too, invest in new customer channels. We talked during the pursuit a little bit about the live shopping kind of world. And while that hasn't manifested yet in our world, that means we need to have hard conversations together. And we chose to use some relatively new parts of your platform in these builds in order to make it easy for us to take this marketplace into all the different titles. And we're having to go pretty deep in your catalog a little bit to make that easy for our editors. So that's one thing that I'm not sure it would ever have been knowable in kind of a sales pursuit. But we've been happy with the fact that we can sit down with your product team and have pretty hard-nosed conversations around what does and does not work. And then come back together and talk about, okay, do we customize here? Do we bring in another partner? Or do we decide to kind of co-create together? And so I would say that's one that I didn't expect to know. We weren't trying to answer all those questions, but we have been happy that when we have bumped into the limits that aren't going far enough, we've been able to find a working team and a solution relatively quickly in a way that's going to help us continue to stay on track for the further releases.
Yeah, you did indeed. You did it well. I remember when we start talking, the team of IT in Hearst for e-commerce was 3.
I think it was 3 of us on the technology side.
3 of you, and they hire us with 3-4 people from their side, and after 7 months they were live. So it really amazing achievement. We do have a question. Congrats.
Hi, hello. Hi, Mariano. John Provisor from Guidance, CIO. And you mentioned that the content and the commerce is the key to future online shopping and conversion. And if you aren't a Hearst who has millions of page views and articles and driving traffic to real rich content, can you give us similar scenarios where that might work?
Yes. For example, we do have plenty of influencer kind of commerce. So many famous artists are launching their own e-commerce. We have countries where we are seeing kind of out of blue from 0 to 300 million in 3 months because the lady or the guy is very famous and they just stand up with a new brand with one SKU. It's not like one product, it's one SKU, and they do more of companies like L'Oreal. So you cannot ignore the content that you don't admire. I tell my kids that a lot, because we are biased. Society, when you grow up, you become biased. So you start to ignore, oh, I don't like TikTok. Oh, I don't like that. Say, okay, but don't ignore it. Like TikTok is a powerful tool. WhatsApp is a powerful tool. Apple Business Chat is a powerful tool. This is all content. So content is not only the banners or the images. Banners, content are also conversations. So I believe US will be flooded with these new kind of techniques. And in fact, it is already being flooded. If you see Temu, if you come back with the Temu numbers again.
Which one?
It's a 3 times the traffic of Target.
Oh, that one.
That's an app that 1.5 years ago, it doesn't exist in the United States. So Temu is, I believe, today, the highest downloaded, the most downloaded app in the United States above any other. So, why? I believe this is content. The way they sell, it is a content. So when the TikTok CEO came to the West Coast and said, TikTok is a searchable shopping, nobody believed that. I said, oh, it was a joke. It was 2 years ago. And the guy stayed for, we are a searchable shopping. And now look the numbers of TikTok in the content and commerce. So I believe we're going to see the concierge commerce. If you have a physical stores, all your sales team, they are an influencer of your brand. They should act in behalf of the offline channel and the online channel. So bringing them to the online journey is mandatory. If you have a MLM company like Avon, like L'Oreal, you should bring the network of hundreds of thousands of consultants to help the online journey as well. So this convergency in between people, online and trade, it is what I'm calling the concierge commerce, and the content and commerce is in the center of that. Want to add something?
No, I mean, I think to the point we were speaking about earlier was meet your customers where they are in the journey. So be open to more than one place to find them. And that's true of us. We're not going to be the only marketplace. That's not the goal. But we fit a part of that exploration. And so being open to wherever that's happening for your audience and constantly looking, I think, is part of how you achieve that kind of long-term, more defensible profitability.
I can finish saying that was probably the most kind of incredible hotel chains in the United States, Four Seasons, right? Four Seasons right now, they don't have anymore any channel that you can call. They just have a platform that you can chat. No matter what you need, they are there for you. If you need a water in your fridge, or if you need a new room, or if you need a new reservation, you just send them a message. So I believe a society is achieving a wealth that you don't want to search anymore. You just want someone that you trust to tell you what to do. And that is where Hearst comes to arbitrate the world of trade. If someone from Hearst on a specific magazine of diving tell me that, though, this is the best garment for you, that's what I want to hear, and I would buy it. So it would save me, anytime that you can sell time for your consumers, you're going to win. And I believe with this curation editorial authority that Hearst has, they're going to win. And it's going to be, in 1 year time, we're going to come back here, not in Big Idea 1, we're going to be in Big Idea 3, the biggest one, and that's going to be crowd, because they're going to say, oh, Hearst is changing the world of commerce. And I believe so. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Mariano.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, guys.